Hello there. My name is Salim Javed and I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Mass Communication and Media Technology at SGT University. This lecture is about World Photography Day, which is observed on the 19th of August of each year. World Photography Day is an annual worldwide celebration of the art, craft, science and history of photography. Every year on the 19th of August, it is celebrated. But why do we observe World Photography Day on the 19th of August of each year? The day traces its origin to 1837 when the first ever photographic process, the daguerreotype, was developed by the Frenchmen Louis Daguerre and Joseph Nicephore-Niépce. On January 9, 1839, the French Academy of Science announced this process, and later in the same year, which makes it on August 19, 1839, the French government purchased the patent for the invention and gave it, free. He gave it as a gift to the world. So it was free for the rest of the world. It happened on August 19, 1839. Therefore, this day, August 19, has been observed as the World Photography Day. Now, if you remember, I've just said that it's a celebration of art, craft, science, and history of photography. Now, photography is an art, it's a craft. There is a lot of science involved in it, and obviously the development makes the history of it. During these lectures, we will understand how you can say that photography is an art, how we understand photography as a craft, what science has to do with photography, and what are the development, and how we have reached up till this stage. Now, before I start my lecture, there are few names that one must familiar with or understand or get acquainted with. Now, Aristotle is everywhere. You read political science, history, geography, for that matter drama. Aristotle is everywhere. The next name is Al-Hasan. Now, his actual name is actually Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham. So it's quite a long name, so better we call him as Al-Hasan. The third thing that we will be understanding what is camera obscura. Then the next person is John Heinrich Scholz, Thomas Wedgwood, Joseph Nicephore-Niépce, Louis Jacques Daguerre, William Henry Fox Talbot, Frederick Scott Arch, and Gustave Le Gray. So these two names are together. Then we are talking about Edward Muybridge. Some of you know because I have talked about him when I was talking about the history of films. Then you have George Eastman. Now all these names that are that I have just said, Aristotle, Al-Hasan, knowing about camera obscura, Scholz, Wedgwood, Niépce, Daguerre, Talbot, Archer and Le Gray, Edward Muybridge, and then George Eastman, and all the latest development that I'll be talking during the lecture. Now, if you understand these names, these 4, 5, 6 names, then it becomes not very difficult actually to follow what has gone into the making, how it has developed. Now, imagine that we are talking about World Photography Day. So before photographs, we had paintings. Before that, we had different kind of arts, and photography also got the status of art. So what has gone into that it has acquired the status of art, we will understand. During the lecture, we will also understand that how photography is one of the most powerful tools of storytelling. So let's start the journey. Now, when we talk about Aristotle, so since at least the time of Aristotle, it had been known that the rays of light passing through a pinhole would, form an image. So this is what the base for camera obscura. I'll be talking about camera obscura also. By the 10th century, Arabian scholar Alhazen, I told you the name, his full name, it's quite long, so we'll call him Alhazen, describes the effect in detail and told how to view an eclipse of the sun in a camera obscura. Camera obscura literally means dark chamber, a darkened room with a pinhole opening to the outside. Now, when we talk about Alhazen, and when you look and if you want to know about, if you want to know more about him, he is the father of modern optics. Alhazen is the father of modern optics. So all the lenses, when we read all the lenses and everything, so they fall into the category of optics, and he's called the father of modern optics. Now, by the time of Renaissance, Renaissance is an age which is related to English literature, and it's a specific time. A lens had been fitted into the hole to improve the image, and the camera obscura was becoming smaller and more portable. It shrank from a fixed room to a small box that could easily be carried about. Now, probably many users of the camera obscura tried to move from reflection of image to a drawing board with paper, and dreamed of fixing this image permanently. Now, what was exactly happening? Because there was a lens in a box, and the image that was coming from outside was reflected inside, and you put on a piece of paper and you start drawing on that. But that was only a sketch, but it was not so-called photograph. So from sketch, which we were precisely making with the help of camera obscura, so there was still a gap. Now, the darkening of the certain silver compound by exposure to light had been observed as early as 17th century, but the unsolved and difficult problem was how to halt this reaction so that image would not darken completely. Now, think of something that when you put an anklet of silver, chandi ki payal jise hum log kehte hain, so with the passage of time, you find that this anklet is going black. So generally we understand that this is dust, rust, whatever we may call it, but silver has a tendency to get darkened when it is exposed to light. Now, this very basic understanding, which was like 17th century understanding, now this becomes base for many of the experiment. And trust me, when I'll be explaining and how science works in photography, silver, though directly it did not contribute in making the first permanent picture, silver iodide and silver chloride, but they have played a very important role in discovering and making people believe that we can achieve a permanent image. Now, there is another gentleman, as I said, when I was talking about a lot of people, important people. So after Aristotle, Alhazen, so the third person in the list is John Henrik Scholz. Now, it may become very difficult for a student to remember this long name, so you may remember him as Scholz only, Scholz. So, John Henrik Scholz, so you remember it as Scholz only. Now, Scholz experimented with silver chloride, and notice that it is light sensitive, it is very light sensitive, and silver particles change its color when exposed to light. He concluded, rather he conducted an experiment where he took a jar, and in that jar he put chalk dust, then he put silver chloride solution in that, and then he put in a stencil around it. Now, there is a jar which is full of chalk and silver chloride, and there is a stencil covering. Now, what is a stencil? So, if you remember, when we were young, we used to cut out leaf in a paper. So, if you spray on that empty leaf inside on a paper, so that leaf will get printed on the surface. So, that is the utensil. So, when Scholz put this particular jar, which is covered with the utensil, chalk and silver chloride inside, now when he puts it in the sun, what happens that the entire jar is covered except that the design of the leaf. Now this leaf, because it has silver chloride also, so this leaf becomes dark. So as soon as you remove this stencil from the jar, so you see there is a leaf which is in the jar. But so there is an image which is different than rest of the jar. It looks like a leaf. Leaf, just an example that I am saying. Now, the moment you put the entire utensil from the jar, now the entire jar is also exposed. Now, when this entire jar is also exposed, so that also starts getting dark. So, the moment it also starts getting dark, that leaf is gone. But, and he took it as an experiment only, and he never took it beyond experiment. But this particular exercise, it became the basic of photography. Now, at the beginning of the 19th century, Thomas Wedgwood. So earlier we talked about, so I'll be repeating it. Earlier we talked about Aristotle, then we'll talk about Alhazen, then we talk about Scholz. Now we are talking about Thomas Wedgwood. Now, Thomas Wedgwood was basically a son of a famous British pottery manufacturer, and he was first to attempt to record the image created by a lens in a camera obscura. Though he was unsuccessful with the camera, but he did make negative silhouettes of leaves, something, I just gave an example. So he did make some negative silhouettes of leaf and insect's wing by placing them on white paper or white leather sensitized with silver nitrate. So we were dealing with silver chloride there, here we are dealing with silver nitrate, and exposing them to the sun. The paper darkened where it was exposed to the light, but not where it was shielded by the object placed on top. Wedgwood tried many ways to make these silhouettes permanent, but nothing worked. When light struck the image, the rest of the image that was taken other than the object placed, so when you remove it, again the same problem as it was in the first experiment. When the light struck the image, they began to darken like the rest of the coating. Now, although Wedgwood had been working along the right line with the investigation of silver compound, nitrate and chloride, but silver played actually no role at all in the first permanent picture that can be called a true picture, or that can be called a true photograph, not picture, that can be called as a true photograph. Before cameras, inexpensive portraits were made by cutting silhouettes, a process sarcastically named after a French finance minister, Etienne de Silhouette, who had imposed taxing the rich so heavily that only their outline would remain. It's a very interesting information, because when we read silhouette, we read a lot about it, silhouette, but this word silhouette, which is basically the outline of a person, and the rest of the person is not, we can't make out who that person is, but we know that he is a person because outline is there. So this is, the word silhouette comes from a man, and that person was the finance minister, Etienne de Silhouette, who wanted to tax rich people of France so much that only the outline would remain. So now you know the joke. Silhouette is a joke also, but obviously in our field silhouette is a technical term, but basically it comes from here. Now, it was attempted by no later than 1826 by Joseph Nicéphore Niépce. Now, so far the names, now these two names, Niépce and Daguerre, these two names are very, very important. So if you are talking about the developments of photography, how it has evolved, how it has started, so these two names are something that you cannot do away with. So Joseph Nicéphore Niépce. Now the issue is that most of us are not very comfortable pronouncing these names. So it's good. Joseph Nicéphore Niépce. Now the spelling says Nicephore, Nicéphore. No, it's a French name, so it becomes Niépce. Joseph Nicéphore Niépce. So it's good to remember Niépce and Daguerre. So it is easy to remember, like Niépce, Daguerre. So this is something easy to remember. Now he is a gentleman, Joseph Nicéphore Niépce. He is an inventor, and he was from France. Niépce had become interested in the new process of lithography, which at that point of time required the drawing first to be copied by hand in reverse onto a printing plate. Now this is something exactly like camera obscura, how camera obscura was working. NIAP decide to devise an automatic method of transferring drawing, and soon extended that idea to to make a direct copy from nature by using the camera obscura. Now, NIAP knew about Scholl's experiment, and he first, again, because as he did, Scholl's experimented, NIAP also experimented with silver chloride. But by 1820, he had turned from silver chloride, and before I was talking about silver nitrate. So from silver chloride and silver nitrate, he turned his attention to bitumen of Judea, a kind of sulfate that hardened when exposed to light. Now this bitumen of Judea is, remember this because we will be talking about it. Now, NIAP discovered that bitumen in lavender oil, okay, a solvent basically which is used in varnishes. It is a solvent which is used in varnishes. So this bitumen, with this bitumen, he coated a sheet of paper with this bitumen. He used his crude camera obscura and placed that bitumen painted sheet in the camera obscura and aimed it through an open window at his courtyard and exposed it for 8 hours. So the first exposure time was 8 hours. The light forming the image on the plate hardened the bitumen in bright areas while leaving it soft and soluble in the dark areas. NIAP then washed the plate with lavender oil, and because he washed with the lavender oil, so this removed the soft soluble bitumen that had not been struck by the light. The result was the first photograph, and NIAP had succeeded where Wedgwood had failed. He had found a way to remove the unexposed and still light sensitive material so that the image can remain permanently. He called it heliograph. Helio in Greek means sun, and graphos means drawing. So basically heliograph means drawing by the sun, technically, okay, not of the sun, drawing by the sun. Though it was crude, but it spurred him to continue his experiment. Now, there is a very interesting story here. We are talking about NIAP, and I said that when we are talking about NIAP, we also have to talk about Daguerre. Now, NIAP is the one who made the first permanent picture. As I have just said, heliograph he has made. Now, Daguerre was more of a businessman, less of an inventor. NIAP is more of an inventor and less of a businessman. Now, how these two gentlemen meet? Now, there is a very interesting story behind it, and you must know, so you understand, though it is basically NIAP who has made the first permanent picture, but the celebration is of Daguerre type in 1839 that we are talking about, when it was made freely available for the world and it was granted by French government. Now, somebody else is making first permanent picture. Somebody else style is getting all the recognition, and that becomes the first photographic developing mechanism of the world. So how this thing is happening? So for that you need to know the story. Now the story is that when Daguerre, I'll tell you about Daguerre, but let me just first tell you about the story. Daguerre got to know about NIAP, that he has developed a first permanent picture. Now imagine, it's a time of industrial revolution where every information is a top secret. I mean, it's a top secret information. Why? Because people will steal. Now, he used to run his business, Daguerre, he used to run his big business of panorama. I'll be talking about it. Now, when he comes to know about NIAB, that he has developed the first permanent picture, now it gets Daguerre extremely interested, extremely. So he writes. Now, but how he comes to know is also a story. Now, Daguerre and NIAB, these two gentlemen are different, but their optician was common, from where they used to buy equipments and everything. So the optician of NIAB was also the optician of Daguerre. So it was the optician who told Daguerre that NIAB has made the first permanent picture. Now this Daguerre becomes very interested. He writes, but NIAB, he did not, he did not give any response. But then Daguerre put a lot of effort, and he had a conversation with NIAB, and after that, this process started. Now, meanwhile, as I said, that this is the background, so it will become easy for you to understand. So this is how this information that the first permanent picture has been achieved reached to Louis Jacquemin Daguerre. Now, this may look very fancy, but it's difficult to remember, so you remember him as only Daguerre, okay? Though the actual name is Louis Jacquemin Daguerre. Now, he also bought the lens, as I said, from the same optician, and he was, running the entire system. He was running a popular diorama display, a spectacle in which famous scenes such as panorama of the Swiss Alps were recreated with illusion and huge translucent painting, and he was also interested in giving it a permanent shape. Now, in 1829, they became partners, and then they both started experimenting. Now, what happened is, by 1833, they became partner in 1829. By 1833, NIAB died. And after that, he continued his experiment at his own, and it was January 9th, 1839. At some places it is written January 7, at some places it is written January 9. So both dates are absolutely fine because year is same. So on January 1839, he goes to the French Academy of Science and says that I have made a process which is called Daguerre type process. They see all the experiments, reads all the paper, and they accept it, and the response was sensational. That is all in this video. Thank you very much.